Commission and served as president of Hampton Roads Pride and continues to support many other organizations whose mission he is passionate about. Michael serves as the City Council liaison to the Human Rights Commission, to the Development Authority, Community Development Corporation, 531 Memorial Committee, Arts and Humanities Committee, Sister City. A native of Hampton Roads with 30 years in public education. Dr. Galika S. Gavin has served as a teacher, assistant principal, executive director of special and gifted programs, and executive director of professional learning in various school divisions in Hampton Roads. She has also served as an adjunct professor and lecturer in the Department of Educational Leadership and currently serves as the Assistant Vice President for Diversity and Inclusive Excellence at Old Dominion University. Dr. Caitlin serves the community as a member of the League of Women Voters in the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Virginia Beach and is a stable member of the Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities. Next, I'm going to introduce right here to my closest right, Reverend Mario Melendez. He's a chaplain for Latino ministries in this Episcopal Diocese of Southern Virginia. Padre Mario is also the Episcopal chaplain and co-pastor at the Church of the Holy Apostles in Virginia Beach, an Episcopal and Roman Catholic ecumenical community recognized by both the Episcopal Diocese of Southern Virginia and the Catholic Diocese of Richmond. He was born and raised in Puerto Rico and attended seminary at Boston University School of Theology, graduating with a Master of Theological Studies. He was ordained to the priesthood in the Anglican Church of Canada and served in the Diocese of Western Newfoundland before coming to Virginia. Next, I'm going to introduce to you on my father's right over here, Rabbi Dr. Israel Silverman. He is a Nobel Peace Laureate, a Holocaust survivor, and the famous leader and writer, Elie Wiesel, has written about Dr. Rabbi Dr. Israel Silverman, stating, as the son of Holocaust survivors, founder of his congregation in Virginia, an outspoken writer on Jewish and community issues, he has worked to keep the memory of that tragic period in human history close in Jewish and American consciousness. Though respected for his spiritual leadership, he is equally sought for his erudition. And that is coming short, because we know that Rabbi Silverman is a lifelong, very involved member of our community that stands for justice issues. Next, I personally admire for a long time, it is our friend Jonathan Zuber. He is the president and CEO of the Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities, an organization that works with schools, businesses, and communities to achieve success through inclusion. An experienced facilitator and consultant on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, Jonathan was appointed by the governor of Virginia to the Commonwealth Commission on Diversity, Inclusion, Equity, and Inclusion, and that was formed in the aftermath of the tragedy in Charlottesville in August 2017. In 2016, he was a speaker at the inaugural White House Summit on Diversity and Inclusion in Government. Jonathan is a graduate of the University of Richmond, and he received a certificate in nonprofit executive leadership from the Center on Philanthropy at Indiana University. So please help me give him a warm welcome with your applause. And that's a thank you for dedicating the time again for this important conversation in our community. I'm gonna start with Dr. Gardner at the end, and I think we'll go in that direction. And I'm gonna ask you to please share with us a little more about yourself and or your organization and your work in the community so that our audience can get to know you a lot better.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the invitation. I know Dr. Coleman was a little bit under the weather today. So, just a point of privilege. I graduated from this school in 1989.
Similarly, I think the work that I have the honor of doing at the Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities is really a reflection of the passions that I have, the commitments that I have, the values that I hold. And I think for each of us, we reflect a range of identities. One of the lines that I really appreciate from Dr. Cornel West is our roots help to determine our roots. And so when you think about our roots, R-O-O-T-S, they can help to determine our roots or routes, depending on how you pronounce it, R-O-U-T-E-S. And I think that in so many ways is true for me. I'm the grandson of Holocaust survivors. I'm the son of an immigrant to this country, and from a young age, knowing about the experiences that my grandparents and parents had, I think it helped to shape the values and passions that drive the work that I do each day and also the commitments that I have in the community. I also am a white male sitting on the stage talking about being on a panel connected to issues of race. And I think it's also important to acknowledge the access and opportunity and responsibility that comes with that that I have each day. And so my colleagues and I at the Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities are hopefully a resource and a partner for schools, for businesses, and community groups here in Hampton Roads and across the Commonwealth to help people move from a process of awareness to action. I think we live in a society where there are some folks who are eager to explore these issues and learn about them. We also know that there are folks who are resistant to uncomfortable with these conversations. There's lots of evidence that within these discussions, reaction constitutes problems.
Folks, good evening. First of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you for having me here. It's great to have you. It's great to be here on the stage with all of you. And of course, to you, thank you for being here. Thank you for the gift of your presence. Thank you very much. As a priest, as a Christian, and as a human being, I try my best to do my vocation as every day. When I talk about vocation, I mean that I have two sort of hats. I do the work with my parish or the apostles, and I do the work with the diocese, and that's more into parts of Southern Virginia. So for example, some of my work may take me to about 3 weeks ago. I was speaking to students at a school in Richmond, in which I was invited to go there and speak a little bit about not only about the issues of racism, but also what we can do. And what they can do as young people as well. Or it can be going to the Eastern Shore and supporting the work of migrant workers. These are the folks that are out there. These are the folks that put the food on our table. They're the ones that are out there in the fields picking up the vegetables that eventually make it to our tables. And some of them, it's not just the hard work of 10, 12 hours in the sun, but it's also that sometimes if they're lucky and they get to go to Walmart to pick up, to buy whatever they need for the week, then some people will make comments, some people would treat them with no dignity. So can you imagine, coming here from your own country, coming here, being here for 4 or 5 months to work hard to put food on people's tables and even treated without dignity. So what can my ministry and folks with me, what can we do to walk with them, to support them in their lives? And again, trying to remember that, to echo what some of the things that you have said, this isn't easy, this is uncomfortable, this can be uncomfortable to discuss, to talk about. Sometimes I hear the expression that this is divisive. Well, yes it is. So the question is, what do we do after?
Thank you, Father. Councilmember Lucci.
Thank you, Beatrice, and good evening to all of you. I just want to take a moment to thank you for making the time to be part of this discussion. I'm going to try to make my remarks brief because I'm very interested in the learning opportunities that exist here, and I know we're all anxious to hear from you about your feedback about our community and about how we can work together to improve life in our community for everyone. I'm also so pleased to be part of this discussion. Prior to serving on council, I served as a member of the Human Rights Commission for 5 years, with many and most of the folks who are here with us this evening. So it really brings me great pleasure, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be back with you to continue to serve our community. But really what led me into public service is one reason, and one reason only, and that's to help establish an environment where every single person is treated with the dignity and respect that we deserve and has an opportunity to fulfill their full potential. And the reason that I carry that inspiration and that goal so closely to my heart and to my mind and to my consciousness is because growing up as a member of the LGBTQ community in Virginia Beach, I grew up with a sense, and I know many of my peers had the same sense, that we needed to leave Virginia Beach in order to be successful, that we were going to go to other communities that were more welcoming, more inclusive, and that we would be able to fulfill our potential there. I know now that much of that was based on my own fears and insecurities, and some of that was based, much of that also was based in reality. And many people did leave the community, and I did. And when I moved back as an adult, I became involved in supporting organizations whose missions that I was passionate about, including Hampton Roads Pride, as was previously mentioned. I joined the Human Rights Commission. And then I went about trying to build intersections and relationships where we could pursue that goal together. I do not know what it's like to be a person of color. I do not know what the experience is like to be a woman or a person who is transgender or a variety of the other categories. But I do have a sense, based on my own experiences, about what discrimination looks like and feels like and how damaging it can be on an individual. And I want to be part of, I've always wanted to be part as an adult of building a coalition together that can help to combat those forces and help to establish an environment where each of us have a chance to fulfill our full potential and that we're treated with dignity and respect. And we can pursue policy goals that advance that mission. And so it's a work in progress. It's a work that never ends. And I look forward to this discussion about how we can further inform that work and continue to develop and build a coalition where we can advance those goals together as one community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Robert Weatherman.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. I stand before you, or I sit before you, as a rabbi of 49 years of experience as a congregational pulpit rabbi. And currently for the 4th year, I'm so privileged and delighted to share with Father Mario at the Church of the Holy Apostles around the corner. They house my Jewish congregation. Before that, I had another congregation for 31 years, Congregation Beth Haverim. So I'm the founder of 2 Jewish congregations. And I made it to see why I'm the founder of not just one congregation, but of 2. I happen to be the son of Polish Holocaust survivors who met in Siberia. I was born as a refugee in 1945 in Kazakhstan, a Muslim majority country that was part of the USSR back then, and spent my early childhood among refugees in Poland, Austria, Germany, and Israel, where I grew up. My family lost hundreds of relatives in the Holocaust, and thus, in addition to being a rabbi, my family background propels me to speak up as my dear friend Elie Wiesel, that I happen to have the good fortune to have met him, and we developed a special bond that I will cherish for the rest of my life. Here, my friends, there is a direct correlation between anti-Semitism that has been growing in America in ways that we could not even imagine. But before World War II, there was also lots of anti-Semitism in America. There is a correlation, direct correlation between anti-Semitism and the weakening of the democratic structure, accelerated by culture wars as we experience right now. Mindful that anti-Semitism is Western civilization's original sin, a virulent and resistant virus rooted in the traumatic separation of nascent Christianity in the 3rd century from Judaism, its mother religion. Ultimately, we believe that separation led to the colossal destruction of the Holocaust, losing 2/3 of European Jewry, which at the time was 1/3 of the Jewish people worldwide, which included 1.5 million children who happened to be Jewish. Virginia is the proud home of the Virginia Statue on Religious Freedom, the 1786 grandchild of no other than Thomas Jefferson. That statue was a precursor to the indispensable First Amendment protections allowing America to flourish. And dare we not see the elimination of those protections that offered separation of church and state, which we not have in Europe, and also provided alternative for the Holocaust. How is it then that a US president in 2017 responded to a neo-Nazi night march in Charlottesville with lit torches, and the participants in that march didn't even cover their faces, shouting the Nazi slogan, quote, "The Jews will not replace us," end quote. And the United States president abashedly declared, quote, "There were good people on both sides," end quote. No, there were not good people on both sides. And from there, not surprising, to the 2018 murder on the Sabbath during worship of 11 worshiping Jews who happened to be on the elderly side at Pittsburgh's Tree of Life Synagogue, the worst anti-Semitic attack on American soil ever. And from there, I believe, no surprise, leading to the January 6, 2021 unfathomable insurrection, with the desecration of the inner sanctum of our secular American democracy. I happen to have given 2 prayers in the US Senate and 2 prayers in the House. And I watched the desecration took place by a mob, and some of them had Nazi symbols on them. I could not believe that this is our beloved America, the leader of the democratic world. You know, it may start with the Jews, but it never ends with the Jews, my friends. We are the canaries in the coal mine. And when we suffer, sooner rather than later, other groups are bound to suffer. The late great teacher of our generation, the moral authority, I dare say, of our generation, Elie Wiesel, died in 2016. I wonder what he would have said about what began in Charlottesville in 2017 and culminated in an attempt to overthrow the democratic system. He wrote in his last book, number 57, called Open Heart. He had open heart surgery at the time, but he's talking about opening up his heart to the frustrations and disappointments of his generation of Holocaust survivors, that the lessons of the Holocaust were not heeded, that democracies are fragile institutions that need our attention, our response. Otherwise, my friends, they're all going to suffer. We're all in it together. We have reason to be concerned, I say it with pain in my heart, of America's future as a democracy, with the unrelenting attacks from the far right and the far left. And how is it, let me add, that here in our beloved Virginia Beach, with its celebrated diversity, in the old courthouse from the Civil War era, there's not yet a plaque, a simple plaque, that I recommended a number of years ago to tell us in the world that black slaves were sold here, just 2 miles away. Scenes that should not be erased from our consciousness. Because if we cancel history, my friends, we're all doomed. At the time, I served with Councilman Bellucci and others on the city roundtable committee that ultimately recommended, also with my urging as a member of the Holocaust family, the relocation of the lone Confederate soldier gazing upon us from above. I do believe that all racial and racist evil, prejudice and bias are linked in a brotherhood of contempt for an enlightened, liberal, inclusive, democratic society. And yet, all goodness, whatever its source, is bound together as one blessing. Let us affirm, and I'm privileged to have served on Human Rights Commission for 10 years, that human rights are universal, sacred, and non-negotiable. I coin the phrase, quote, God's divinity and human dignity are one and inseparable, end quote. May we pray and act together, because we have to do it together, my friends. On behalf of Shalom's blessings of healing, hope, and harmony for all of God's children, let us say Amen, and thank you for being here. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Silverman. You are kicking us off with a very good question, and I'm going to follow asking Councilmember Ruch, and then we'll go in this direction about a few things that you brought up. And one of them was that Jonathan Zor said that we find uncomfortability about talking about race, bias, racism. And so there may be some people out there that say, why do we need to talk about that? What is the importance of a community to have a conversation on these issues? And then, what about, and what is it that is needed so that we really don't need to continue bringing that subject up? Councilmember Lucci.
Thank you. Well, I think it's important to have a conversation even when it's uncomfortable, because for generation and for thousands of years, we haven't lived in equality. And so as we strive as an American nation and as even globally toward a more inclusive, more equal environment for all people, it's vital that we have those conversations and that we continue to address the inequities, the disparities, and the injustices, however uncomfortable they make us. And at times, they can be very uncomfortable. What was the second part of your question?
What is the value of not only having a conversation, but engaging in our community to participate? And, what are your recommendations for that action to be,
The value is that hopefully we're striving toward, as I mentioned previously, an environment where every single person is treated with the respect and dignity that we deserve, and every single person has a chance to fulfill their full potential. And imagine what type of community, what type of city, what type of country we could live in if we could all contribute fully without interferences based on bias, based on prejudice, based on discrimination. We could unlock amazing potential within ourselves, within our families, within our neighborhoods, if we had the chance to be free and contribute freely without fear or impact of discrimination and bias and injustice. It's a constant conversation. I think it's one that will never end. We have to continue to address these disparities, these inequities, these injustices, but it's worthy of our attention. It's worthy of our effort. And if the last 2 years have taught us anything, it's that it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to take a step back and listen, which is about what I'm about to do, and to take the time to consider the experiences of other people so that we can hopefully find ourselves in an environment where we can be more understanding, more respectful, and allow each other the space and the dignity to contribute fully and fulfill our full potential.
Thank you. Father Melendez.
Yes, when it comes to speaking about those things that are uncomfortable, if we could not, I would be out of the job. I mean, from my point of view as a Christian, when it comes to loving your neighbor as yourself. Christ said about living down your life for your friends, taking care of the widow, taking care of the orphan, that yes, that's uncomfortable, and it's divisive. So just from that point of view, that argument falls flat. When it comes to why we have to talk about this, is because this is something that I have shared with my congregation, and that is that the trauma and the wounds of racism are with us, and we are all affected by it. The question is, how much and in what ways? And I'll give you an example. In my work when I was at school that I mentioned, one of the things that came up was, that comes sometimes, from people that have good hearts, that told me, well, Father, I don't see color. When I see a person, that's a person, and I'm not treated with respect. And when I hear that, I say, I know it's coming from a good place in your heart, I do. But just stop for 1 second and think about this. If when you say I don't see color, that means what? What color is this? Is this blue or is this something else? Is this black or is this something else? The issue is not whether we see color or not, because we see color. The issue and the question is what happens after we see color. How do we act and how do we treat others? How to see color? Oh, and by the way, sometimes in ways that we don't even notice. So that's part of it.
Thank you. Jonathan?
I think we need to interrogate why it is uncomfortable to think about and talk about some of these issues. I think it's because as a society, we have not had the opportunity to practice. I think that society has been taught you don't talk in the public square about quote unquote controversial topics. We also can see that our neighborhoods are set up in such a way that folks generally are going to schools with people who are from similar racial and ethnic backgrounds, similar socioeconomic backgrounds. And so there's just not a lot of practice, which means that the moment of engaging on a topic like race becomes a bigger event than I think it needs to be if we were regularly interacting with folks who hold different backgrounds, experiences, and hearing from and learning from them. I think it's also important to recognize that if we are addressing racism as a society, the goal is not comfort, justice. The goal is not comfort, the goal is justice. And we need to tease that out a little bit. So sometimes I'll hear folks in workshops that we facilitated at the Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities saying this makes me uncomfortable. Or hearing about this, you're making me feel guilty. And one, I think it's important to name, discomfort is never part of a learning objective in any of our programs. Guilt is never part of a learning objective in any of our programs, but I'll start to tease that out with someone who says I'm uncomfortable or I'm feeling guilty. And I'll say, well, let's talk about this a little bit. You've learned about an experience that someone else has where they've experienced injustice, and now you're focusing on your feeling of discomfort or guilt. So who are you making it about? You're not making it about the injustice to address, you're making it about yourself. How does that help us to address the issue? And so I think folks need to be able to be self-reflective and also to recognize that our shared work is about addressing the injustice, and avoiding the conversation, avoiding the interaction is clearly not getting us to the result we're looking for. And so part of this is really helping people to be okay engaging in that conversation, okay learning about the fact that my experience may be similar to or different from the folks who are sitting next to me, and how do we make meaning of those differences to work together towards our goal of justice rather than everyone feeling comfortable. The last thing I'll say is that there are some people who are uncomfortable every day. There are some people who are experiencing racism every day that are uncomfortable, and if we center comfort as the goal, we're ignoring and dismissing and erasing those very real experiences. Sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Bateman.
No, that's one of the reasons why when Jonathan asked me to serve on the board for VCIC, I said yes, because I knew that the mission and the goal of the
of the center was that of focusing on justice. So a couple of things. Growth doesn't occur unless there is some level of discomfort, right? So when I talk to people about, I'm a huge proponent of, as an educator, I talk about generalizing skills across all settings. I'll tell a really quick story. I had a young little girl who received speech services, and she would come and she'd come to me and she'd say, Dr. Gallon, it's cold outside, it's cold outside. And I said, Savannah, you just came out of the speech classroom. What are you talking about? It's cold outside. Oh, I only say it's cold in there because she gives me a treat. So she didn't generalize that skill of using that consonant all the time, right? And so when I think about my own lived and learned experiences, and we're all products of our lived and learned experiences, a couple of things. One, be patient with yourself and realize when having these conversations and becoming allies for justice, that you have to be patient and realize that you are the product of your lived and learned experiences. My father passed away in July at the age of 96. My parents, when my mom remarried, she married someone who was a little bit her senior. So I've had the benefit of having two huge generations of folks that have been a part of my life. And he would tell me everything has changed, yet nothing has changed. But one of the things that he would always say is, you cannot go back and change what has happened. We can only go forward. And I paraphrase that also from C.S. Lewis. And so be patient with yourself. Oftentimes people will go back. My son did this to me after the death of George Floyd. There were things that he learned about his own history and about protests and so forth that I didn't teach him. He learned some cursory things from listening to his grandfather, but I was so busy preparing him for the dominant culture of life, the same way my parents prepared me for the dominant culture of life to function at James Madison University, in the music department, in the public relations department. So be patient with yourself and realize that there are certain things that are part of my lived and learned experience that I can't go back and change, but what is something that I can learn a little bit more about? We have to put ourselves in spaces and places with people who don't look like us, who, when Jonathan mentioned those multiple diversity dimensions, as a 52-year-old, I put myself in spaces every day with college students to hear what they're saying. And they're saying we have challenges because there's ageism. People don't see us and take us seriously at our age the way they take someone who's your age, Dr. Gavin, or someone older. And I have to tell them, guess what? My mom and dad said the same thing about me. They said that I didn't know what I was doing either, right? But so one of the things that I challenge everybody to do is choose curiosity over judgment. And Jonathan gave a good example of that. Just kind of taking a step back and saying, you know what? That's not a part of my lived and learned experience, but I would like to hear a little bit more about that. And realizing that that may be just the entry point to the conversation. It may start there, but it won't end there. Because what you hear from that person about whatever that topic is, it's going to have you to question some of the things that you learned and that you lived. And you're going to maybe have to research a little bit. You maybe have to ask some questions. You'll have to go to the family reunion and actually have some dialogue with people or not go to the family reunion. And it causes you to question. And then you may say, well, you know what? I want to come back. I heard what you said, and it questioned some of the things that I know, and it was different from my lived and learned experience. But can we spend another time to come back and have part two of this conversation? And that's what builds relationships. And then that's what builds empathy. Because otherwise, you've only had a mere exposure to something, and you haven't created an experience. And when you understand and you begin to understand more, then you can move into that space of what does justice look like? What does it look like and sound like?
Thank you, Dr. Blackman. Yes, I want to go back to Dr.
Yeah, I
Sullivan.
want to emphasize.
Give us an answer for that
Thank
question.
you. I want to emphasize that something very, very positive about American society, and that is interfaith cooperation and dialogue. I grew up in a Jewish state, but it's practically no non-Jews. In Israel, 1950s and 60s, I came to Chicago in 1966, and I realized for the first time in my life that Jews are a tiny minority. There are only 14 million Jews worldwide. But in time, my Jewish ministry has focused on interfaith dialogue. So that Eastern Shore Chapel Episcopal Church on Laskin Road, they've been around town for over 300 years, and their infinite wisdom gave me a title, honorary senior rabbi scholar, which allows me to preach and teach Episcopalians and others, for example. So we need to see something very, very unique about America. The social change often comes from the religious committed community, my friends. There are so many Jewish lawyers at the border with Mexico and other places. And some point the finger at us and say, what are you doing to help migrants and others? And those Jewish lawyers are there because this is Jewish theology, my friend. This is the basic of our theology. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt 3,000 years ago. Every Jewish worship service includes a reference to the departure from Egypt, a house of slavery, physically, spiritually, and psychologically. So we are duty bound forever and ever and ever to be there with the disadvantaged. And we are in Ukraine, disproportionate numbers, also helping refugees as again the world watches another disaster. I won't say it's necessarily a Holocaust. It's quite similar with bombing of civilians, unrelenting violation of human rights. In the heart of Europe, only 70-some years after the Holocaust. And the world is watching. Democracy does not to respond. And my friends, I hate to say, but shame on us. Shame on this world that allows for people not to be able to go to school, and for mothers not to be able to sleep at night with their babies without fear. We have to do more, not just within our borders. I know there's always that sense of, who cares about what's happening beyond our borders? What an mistake. We learned in World War II that if we do not get involved early enough, we will suffer even more so later on. And so social justice unites all of us. And I'm sure everyone here shares the same theme of we are here for each other. We are our sisters and brothers keepers. This is like the greatest statement that comes from the Hebrew Scriptures, that the Christian world at large adopted. We have a lot at stake. We are in it together, my friends. And we have to stand up and speak up. And sometimes it's risky to speak up. It's risky to speak up. But I know, coming from our own particular background, as a refugee, miraculously my immediate family survived. But I have to remember those who were not so fortunate. We have to speak for them, and ever since then, the killing fields of Cambodia, Rwanda, and now Ukraine. What a shame, what a shame. This is our planet Earth. Is this what we pay the God of love who created us? So, but let's not give up and say, well, it's beyond us, whereby, and we're not into politics, high politics. We can do something, and I suggest even a kind smile, and to meet somebody who's different from us and reach out. That is the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. And before I pose another question, I want to invite our audience to please use their microphones, line up, and we appreciate your entering this conversation. We want to hear from you, and we want you to share your thoughts. If you have a specific question for one of our panelists, you can mention their name, or if the question is for everyone, we'll just ask them to be brief in answering that question. And while you do that and think about maybe an important question you want to share, not only with our community tonight, but actually remember that this is a forum that is made so that the rest of our community can join on our thoughts of making an inclusive community for everyone. Father Menendez.
Yes, I just realized I didn't finish a thought when I was at
Yeah.
the school when I was speaking about the whole thing about seeing color. After the talk, I asked students that we were talking to students, and one student said, "Thank you for saying that, because when I hear I can see color, I get mad because," he said, "I don't have the choice. When I wake up in the morning, I can't simply be another color or be, I am a black boy, I'm a black man." So we need to be careful with the words that we use. Words have power. Words have power. And so we do need to be careful when we say words. And by the way, the next time you hear a politician say, "I am not politically correct," this is what I always say. It is politically correct to say, "I am not politically correct." Number one. And number two, are you saying that because you said something that you think you have not, maybe you shouldn't have said in public, or because somebody's calling you out?
Thank you. I appreciate this.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This is a first for me.
Yes, speak loudly. Is it,
This is a first for me.
thank you.
I had a couple of questions. One question in particular for the whole panel is, why is there so much opposition to critical race theory teaching? If you want to solve the problem, why not start with the history of our people in this country? That's question number one.
Thank you so very much. We'll start, I guess, with Dr. Gatton, because I think that is right up your alley, and the universities and schools are learning institutions. So,
First of all, it is, has been not defined properly, okay? It is a, higher education concept. And when you think about just really context clues, race has been critical to everything that we do. Without even getting into what the, scholars term it, it has been critical to what we do. However, we have had lots of banter that really has unpacked it in a manner that has not been true. And so that's why there's a lot of confusion about it. And when you don't know and don't seek to understand the actual truth behind it, there is a lot of confusion about anything. Okay.
thank you, Dr. Gatton, and I'll follow with Jonathan Soar, who also is immersed in the school system. It comes specifically to teach our students, young and adults, about these issues. So let's hear what he has to say.
For the first year or so that people were talking about critical race theory, I tried one approach to respond, and I will admit it failed miserably. And so my response would be, well, let me give you the actual definition of what it is, and you can look through the Virginia state standards, and critical race theory does not show up, and I would go on and on and on and get red in the face, and nobody cared. People did not respond. And so what I started to do, which I think has had more success, is instead to say, well, help me understand what you're concerned about. Talk to me more about what critical race theory means to you. And what I've heard from folks is that people have questions about what their young children in particular are being taught. They have questions about what books they have access to in school libraries. They might, on occasion, disagree with the content, but it's really much more about a general lack of awareness about what their child is going to come home and say or feel. And so once that's on the table, then I think we can have a conversation about what is age appropriate in terms of helping students to understand accurate history. What are the opportunities we have to make sure that students are aware of what's happened in the past and aware of their responsibility today? They're not responsible for what happened in the past, but they can take responsibility today to make our communities better and stronger. And so I think that this has become an unhelpful shorthand. And the response that I've found in my interpersonal interactions to be most helpful has been a one-on-one conversation. When I say to folks, well, do you want your children to learn accurate history or inaccurate history? People generally say they want accurate history. Do you want children to feel a sense of belonging in schools, or do you want them to feel left out or excluded? People want there to be a sense of belonging. Do you want schools to be rampant with bullying, or do you want students to go to school every day and not worry that they're going to be targeted for who they are? People want. So I think there's an opportunity to have a conversation around it. We are not helped by the political climate, which is, I think, using very few examples that are not representative of what's happening on the whole in our schools and turning those into talking points.
Thank you. Any other panelists that want to address that issue?
Well, before he jumps in, I want to add just a little bit more to what Jonathan said. One of the things too, in having conversations, I have an opportunity to have conversations with older high school students as well as college age students. And so one of the things that they are concerned about is they come back and they ask the people who they feel that they've trusted to give them information. And so again, it goes back to the lived and learned experiences. So those of us who are shepherding young children, we have to be able to be vulnerable enough to say, you know what, that was a part of history. It does kind of gut punch me, because they are asking, this generation is asking the why, right? And so that's another thing that I think that has people on heightened alert, is because our generation X, Zs now are asking, well, you taught me this, mom and dad, auntie and uncle at home, but I hear this now, right? And so there's also that need of conversation in our homes and in our communities to say, this was the past, and they'll ask. You know, I probably would not have asked my Caucasian friend's mother at my age, did y'all own slaves, or did your grandparents own slaves, right? But the kids now, they're asking those questions, and those are the things that are getting people on alert, things like that, and then they're attaching things like critical race theory to that. When these kids now are just, they're asking questions. They're asking questions.
Yeah.
And I'm glad they're asking questions. The thing that's very important to understand is just because we close a certain avenue for discussion doesn't mean that's where it stays. I mean, if you were a teenager, or 15, 16, 17, and you said, well, you can't know. Oh, you mean I can't talk about that? All right. Isn't it, I think it's better if they're asking the questions, okay, let's talk about it, because if they're not gonna hear it from you or from folks of you, they're gonna hear it from somebody, or they're gonna find it somewhere. So the question is how we can continue that conversation, and who knows? Those conversations between parents and children could be good conversations. And as a parent myself, many of your parents is it that we don't want, because it makes our children uncomfortable, or is it because it makes us, the parents, uncomfortable? And of course, the parents, of course, are going to be uncomfortable. But the question is, once we know that, how do we move forward?
Excellent. Rabbi Silverman.
We should never erase the pages of history. We would do so to risk to our very, very survival as humans. History is to be learned from. And surely, one should be uncomfortable if we learn about how slaves were treated in our land. We have to learn from it. We are not supposed to cancel history. I had a case not long ago where I had a piece published in National Record, which I've been very fortunate to publish in quite a bit. And there was a rabbi at the time, the 1860s. He was a New American, and he stated somewhere a position about slavery that today would not agree with. So my article that included his name as the one who was the first rabbi to travel to DC and give a prayer in the House of Representatives, the staff of this Metropolitan Council, and Congressman, and I won't mention his name, called me up and said, Rabbi, we cannot mention his name. So I was at the risk of casting my entire article or just canceling mentioning that name. And I said, well, I regret it, but you know, it's part of history. It's part of history. We can learn from it. We should learn from it. But if we don't share the truth about mistakes and also different attitudes way back, how can we move forward and make progress? The same thing applies in the case of the guilt of Germans, for example. Surely I cannot hold the current youth of Germany responsible for what the grandparents or great-grandparents did to my family and to my people and to the world. But Germany is to be held responsible collectively forever and ever and ever for the safety of the state of Israel. This is their obligation. And after the US is number one friend of Israel, Germany is now number two friend of Israel. So we can use history with all its pain and trauma to make progress toward a better future for everyone. But when we say we don't want to hear it, and also how we express it is very, very important. If we express it in extreme ways of trying to, destroy society because of something that happened to our people 2 generations back, obviously that would not be very, very wise. So how we go about without giving up the responsibility that we have as citizens to speak the truth, whatever it may be. And that's why I will continue to press, and Councilor Bellucci, please help me out. Put a modest sign next to that very modest courthouse. Whenever I go by it, I see the tears of families being separated. Why can't we have something there? I know at one time I wanted a park there to describe the entire context of the Civil War, but till we have a park, can we put a nice plaque, a nice plaque? Those tears cannot be lost. Somebody will remember it. And somebody may come back to haunt us with violence. We have to act upon the misfortunes of the past in a way that allows us to move forward. Otherwise, we're stuck and it will not happen anymore.
Thank you, Rabbi. Councilman Berlucci.
Thank you. Well, one of the things that I learned in the last year and a half particularly, is that this is an extremely complicated and controversial issue. I think your question is why. And I think the panelists here summarized it very well. But the basis of it really, from what I can tell, is fear among some that what's being taught in the classrooms is somehow undermining confidence in our American system, or eroding individuals, particularly young people's faith in our country and in the systems that we rely upon in this country. And I think that's where the fear is coming from. I think that most people agree with that. That's the conversations that I've had have been the basis of that. But I don't think we should ever be fearful about telling the truth about our history. And actually, I think we should rely upon the confidence that we have in American systems, in our democracy, and on the institutions upon which our country is built, that it is prepared to deal with the ramifications of understanding that history more fully. And I think if we are honest about our past and move forward with confidence in this great American experiment in freedom and democracy, and reliance upon the institutions, how even though we know they are imperfect, that we have established that allow us to live in freedom, safety, and security, that will be able really to advance in a way that we can tell the truth about our history and be prepared for a more equal, more dignified, more respectful future for everyone. So those are some of my thoughts on critical race theory.
Thank you. Do you have an additional question?
I just want to end on this note here. I believe, I like what you all the time said. I believe personally that much of the opposition is rooted in the doctrine of white supremacy. When I look at the global stage, when I look at Darfur, Somalia, Haiti, Nigeria, Zambia, when I look at the African continent, in the history of abuse and atrocities that goes unmentioned and unrecorded. No one has suffered more than the black man in this world. And yet the story is not told. And whether you go to the French, or whether you go to the British, or whether you go to the Germans, and you try to give an accurate account of the atrocities that happened to Africans, black people in particular, no one is telling you an accurate story. So how then can you fix the problem if you refuse to acknowledge the historical accuracy that exists there? And until you start having that conversation, a true conversation, not one where we whitewash history, but tell the true story of history, I don't see how we can really fully address and fix the problem.
Yeah, thank you so very much. I'm going to invite, but before we start, I'm just going to ask anyone else that wishes to pose a question or have a statement to step back to the microphone so that we can speak. And I'm going to ask you to please pause while we leave the chance to the panelists to share their thoughts on the last statement that our member of the community posed. And I'm going to ask us to be brief with our remarks, very brief, because we want to include as many people in the audience as possible. So very brief. We'll start again with Dr. Gatto for this direction. Well, it wasn't a question, but if you want to have any remarks, if you don't have anything to add, then that is fine. Dr. Solomon, very briefly.
May I say that every pain is unique. You know, I cannot say that the pain of the Jews is more or less than the pain of others. I think we have to understand that there's hardly a people that has not suffered. And we have to put things in the proper context and, and not to minimize the pain of others. It's very, very important. You know, I have two grandsons who live in DC, 12 and 9, two boys. And there's a great Holocaust museum there. There's one in Richmond with photos of my family. And I dread the time when I have to take them to those museums and tell them where they come from. I will have to do it. But that would not minimize the fact that I wanted to go to the African American Museum in DC as I went, and all the piece connecting the Holocaust and the pain of the African American community. So we have to build bridges of consciousness, of history, and also how do we create joint healing.
Right. Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
I've heard the term, your life, the way you live, and your experience. And I can only speak on my life experience. My life experience has been that the churches continue to stay divided. That we as clergymen and priests, and apostles, pastors, if we continue to allow our assembly to travel along this highway of division, the word says that the world will know him by the way we love each other. And if we're all a part of the body of Christ, and there's divisiveness and division in the body of Christ, then how do we as the church and as believers and as followers of Christ, how do we present that racism and divisiveness is wrong to the world? Secondly, when do we allow people to understand that feeling guilty is all right? The young man said
that when we see color, that's the wrong thing to say. It's once we see color, where do we go from that point? And are we teaching, are we equipping our brothers and our sisters, those that sit in our congregation and in our assemblies on Sunday morning? Are we equipping them to take this message that divisiveness and racism is wrong? Are we teaching them that we can trust the man or the woman that's standing beside us, that rides the bus with us from day to day, that sit and have a cup of coffee with us? Are we really teaching the people that sit in our congregations on Sunday morning? Because I believe that's where it began. I believe it begins we as leaders, and I'm a pastor, so I believe that we as leaders, we must take a stand. We must be the front runners. But when pastors and clergymen and leaders of the house of God do not trust one another, and they cannot come together and be united on something that's just simple as that Black Lives Matter. We ask in our church all the time, where was the Catholic Church when all of this was going on? There are a lot of questions that's being asked, but there seem to be no answers. There seem to be a lot of forums. There seem to be a lot of talk. But in 50 years, we seem to continue to walk backwards. Now to the point where we're at this thing that's called critical race theory.
Yeah.
And
Thank
that's-
you. Give us
it
an
really
opportunity,
exists.
yeah, for our panelists. But thank you, very valuable point. And we just want to tell our audience out there that we're going to amplify a little bit your point, because you're talking about any religious, not just Christians, but rather all religions, faiths. So how is it that we can work towards that final goal of having one humankind relating to one another? How can we use those houses of worship to actually expand on this wonderful idea of being one neighbor to another? Let's begin with Father.
Sure. First of all, thank you, brother. We'd love to talk to you later after we're done. As a Christian, I agree that it is a pain. It is a pain in the body of Christ that we are divided. You know, it is a painful thing. I think any of us that have access to a pulpit, I think any of us that are in ministry out there, we need to remember that we are out there. So the question is, what are we to do? There's the old saying that says, preach the gospel at all times, when necessary, use words. So what are our actions saying? And one of the first things that we should be saying is, if we say that we were created in the image of God, in other words, when we see the person, are we seeing God? Are we seeing the divine? Or are we seeing something else? And what things are we doing either by intention or unintention, that instead of interacting as fellow human beings, that we are treating that person as an object for our agendas, or an object to make us feel rich, or whatever it is. But yeah, I would love to talk to you more about this later, and I want to give time to talk about this.
Sure, and the other person
Yeah.
that has a sit
Here, first, you touched upon something that touched me deeply, Pastor. We have to be mindful that America is not a Christian country. America is a pluralistic society. We have Christians, Muslims, Jews, a few of us left in the world. What can we do? Buddhists, secular people, and humanistic people. So we have to always be mindful when we address our congregation in the world, to know that there are other groups, and we're all in it together. And to understand that, you know, when we speak in a language that is not always inclusive, we may leave out some, we may feel left out and have some pain about it. So, and I know it's hard sometimes, we get caught up in our own legacy and our own problems, but we have to be so mindful. I speak as a member of a minority, so I know that people think that the Jews control the world, which is not the case, technically. So we are very sensitive about being mindful that there are various groups, and America was created to be a country, a nation for all of God's children, whoever they may be.
Thank you. Anyone else that wants to join in?
I was going to say, thank you for saying that, brother. As I was addressing you, on the one hand, yes, you're speaking as Christians, but at the same time, it is always important to bring up our siblings, not only from other faith, but of no faith at all, that are trying to do the best they can.
Yes, it just, as you mentioned, why we keep talking and bringing the subject, and it doesn't seem that we advance that much. But you know, at the beginning, we said that we cannot tire. We have to continue bringing in, as far as the Virginia Human Rights Commission, it is an honor to be the persons that convene these conversations. And maybe we can do it in smaller groups, but we must not tire in bringing these conversations and allowing the community to come and express those feelings.
And I hope you don't tire.
Yeah,
I hope you don't tire. And I apologize if it sounded as if though I was talking about just one religion. We all are a part of the body of Christ.
of course.
Every religion.
And actually, what we know is that you were standing there speaking of your own experience,
Yeah.
and we value that.
Yeah.
Because actually, we cannot be speaking for somebody else. I have to, and we all, when we stand up, we speak for ourselves, right? So, yes.
I mean, let's feel concerned about every brother, every race,
Mhm.
every human being that's on this planet. Unless we see them, unless we are concerned about them, then what we try to do for ourselves will not work. It will only work until we come to the realization that we are the human race. And that's it. There's no other race. We may be of different shades and different colors, but there is still just yet one race. And we must realize that. So what we do to make good for this group, we should be mindful and conscious that we must also make it good for this group,
Absolutely.
for every group. And the thing that I'm ending this, the thing that seems to be the problem is that our laws are made for one group or two groups, and it's not addressing the human race. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, yes. And anybody else from the audience that want to come in and share also their thoughts or ask a question, we welcome your input. The conversation gets much richer when we all participate in this, and it is okay to feel comfortable.
There's somebody that's in back there, there's somebody in back.
Somebody in the back, all right. Maybe if you're, if somebody from our group allowed to bring the microphone to this lady so that she doesn't have to walk, we appreciate it. Thank you. I appreciate it, yes. And actually, please, those of you that wanna, there's another microphone. There's right here another microphone. We welcome you to stand up and use them both. So yes, first this lady, yes. Yes.
To be here and I'm learning a lot, but I would imagine everyone in this room feels the way all of you do. And what I'm wondering is, how do we reach the people that don't participate or want to be here? they may be teaching their children to be prejudiced and use the N-word and et cetera, et cetera. I grew up from the age of 6 to 13 in Alabama and Mississippi. And I witnessed a lot of prejudice. And my parents brought me up to not to be anti-prejudice. I mean, so anti-prejudice, my father was prejudiced against prejudice, if that makes sense. So when I was a single mom and I was moving, I drove around neighborhoods where I was looking for a house when buses were coming home to make sure I was getting into a mixed neighborhood. I wanted my children to grow up in mixed neighborhoods. So anyway, that's how I feel. I just wonder, how do we reach the people that don't come to these events?
Excellent question. Anybody wants to, basically speak a little bit about it? Yes.
I'll be very brief and just quote from Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum, who's the president emeritus of Spelman College and author of a fabulous book, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria, which if you haven't read, I think is well worth reading. But she's often fond of saying that we talk about, we're just preaching to the choir. And she said, well, even the best choirs in the world practice a lot. And so we all need practice. And I think that there's an opportunity to think about what can each of us do who are in this space or who are watching to be intentionally inclusive, to let our words and our actions, to your point earlier, model the type of community and the type of values that we seek. And hopefully that helps to spread the message beyond those who may not have been able to attend tonight.
Thank you. Anybody else?
The only thing that I would add is that we all have our circles of friends, professional circles, religious circles. At the same time, you're also out there, so the only one of the few things that we can do, but I think is very important, is what words are we use. So if you're in a group of friends or you're in a group of people, and somebody says something that you think is not right, and of course you are in that spot where you're the one that has to decide whether you want to address that right there, or maybe later just maybe speak to a person later, by one-on-one and say, hey, why did you say that, right? Sometimes when we want to say something, we act differently when we are in a group of people, right? Because then our sense of saving face, which is a very human thing, we all have that. So if we hear something that we think is right, maybe take the opportunity, take that person aside, say something. But if you feel that you don't have no chance, the question is, again, maybe go with another friend and maybe just speak. It's those little conversations that can make a difference.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'm glad you said, I was having dinner with a group of people several years ago, and one woman was talking about an experience she had at work, and it was with a black man. That's how she said it. She went, and I said, why are you whispering that he's black? And she said, well, there's some black people in the room. I said, well, if he was white, would you whisper he was white? There's white people in the room. And so I addressed it. And I was actually quite proud of myself.
We love you, Lynn. We love you. We love you.
That is wonderful. Thank you. This side, Jamal? Yes. Is there anybody here that wanted to? Yeah, we're gonna bring the microphone to you. Just raise your hand if you want. Yes.
May I say, I must confess, we all have biases. I've never met a human being without other some biases that are born because of our environment or whatever. We were conditioned in this planet to have some biases, and we have to recognize them and work on them. Otherwise, if we don't own them, we have to improve ourselves as we try to improve the world and others. So be mindful of it. And how do we discover that we are biases? Sometimes good therapy can help too.
And another thing is that many people may feel that coming into a space with maybe other people think the same, then it is an unwelcoming, atmosphere. What we want to say here at the Virginia Human Rights Commission is that actually we welcome all opinions. Why? Because by creating a good community, we all have to contribute something, right? And even though we may have differences with one another, there are things that we can agree on. We all want to live in peace. We all want to have a good livelihood. We want all to have good schools. All those are common issues. So we can take the areas in which we can work together. So we don't have to separate. We have to make spaces so that we can say your opinion is welcome, and let's see what other areas we can work together.
I'll stand up. My name is Sharon Harden. I'm actually in the mental health field. I'm a licensed therapist, and I guess for me, my question, just based off of what a lot of what I'm hearing, is the underlying of that is hurt, pain, not being heard, feeling dismissed, and all of that. So, in what ways are you all's organizations or the spaces that you're connected to promoting or encouraging healing? Because it's hard to address racism if you're coming from a broken space. So how are you all engaging in that?
Thank you. Anybody wants to begin?
Can you repeat it, please, dear?
Basically, in your organizations or in your work, how do you address healing from all the issues that we have heard about, hurt and feeling like an outsider to a community?
So one of the things that we do, and I know that Jonathan also does in the organization, is promote healing circles. And what we oftentimes hear is that, to your point, something was said, something was done, I didn't feel like I belonged, I did not feel like I was included. And so we create the situation, we create spaces for those healing circles. One of the things that's very difficult about this type of work, though, is people like to quantify, how many people came, were you changed, fill out the survey. And a lot of it is qualitative. It's like word of mouth, or it is, just seeing changes in behavior. And so one of the things that makes this work difficult, but also extremely important, is that it's personal. So healing circles are personal because people come into it. There are some broad objectives to the healing circle, but there are also things that each individual comes in that are allowed to be a part of the healing circle. I like to say at our church, do you really want to be healed or do you want to be whole? Sit there right there for a minute, right? Because we can be healed from one thing, but if that doesn't lead to transformation and renewal of the mind, then we don't feel that wholeness, right? And so we create those, and those are small spaces, on campus that we create opportunities for students. And of course, they have to be their volunteers, they're on a volunteer basis for them to participate in those healing circles. But after that, we do have so what are the next steps? What are we going to do now with this information? And how we're going to connect it to creating other opportunities for healing. So.
Yeah, so in addition to that work, I think it's also important to recognize that individual and interpersonal interventions will not solve institutional problems. And so if the issue is that a student is harmed because of a school that is disproportionately putting discipline on Black and brown students, well, then inviting that student to express their feelings doesn't address the structural issue. If the issue is that folks are in neighborhoods that don't have access to healthy food or quality health care, then we need to, I think, address healing at the individual and interpersonal level, and we put a lot of time and energy into that, and also at the community and institutional level.
Thank you.
One of the things that I tell my fellow clergy is when it comes to issues of healing, especially mentioned mental health issues, is that first of all, be open yourself. I'm very open about the fact that I have depression and PTSD. People need to hear that from clergy. People need to hear that from leaders. People need, so that as much progress as we have made, there's still this thing that mental health is, they're like, well, you should just get up. You should just, you should just, by the will, by the whole individual thing, this, or just pray it away. I see myself as part of a team. So, for example, I am the priest, and there's the things that I can do. There is a therapist, there is a psychiatrist, there is a social worker, there is the group of friends, the support structures. So that's definitely something that we can do. But thank you again. Thank you for pointing out that there are some structural issues that are beyond what we do. It doesn't mean that we're completely helpless, but it does mean that there's only so much that I or you can do unless we also deal with those serious structural issues. Structures, by the way, that some people in this world don't want them to change. There are people that are making money from certain structures. There are people that have power from that. So when it comes to race, is to remember there are issues of power going on.
Thank you. And, Mr. Bellucci?
Thank you. Well, I'd like to begin really by thanking you for your work in mental health and wellness. I think most of us here, and we could all acknowledge that we're experiencing a mental health crisis in our country, where the impacts are being experienced here in Virginia Beach. It's been one of the preeminent focus of my work on City Council is to create more access and better services in the mental health area by reducing the stigma and also by improving access to vital mental health services, both by creating pathways for patients, for new people to receive the treatment they need, and also by supporting the mental health providers that we have and encouraging new people to enter the field. So I just want to acknowledge how important that conversation is, and I could go on and on about that issue, but that wasn't the basis of your question. But I want to thank you for your work and acknowledge the importance of that conversation. And I think to build on what was said just a few moments ago, one of the best ways I think to heal is to find success, to become empowered, and to be enfranchised. And so I think it's critically important that we are pursuing policies that enable each individual, each citizen to find that success, to find that empowerment, and to be enfranchised, to have educational excellence for every student, for all people in our city, that we have affordable housing options so that people can live in the city where they work and be unencumbered by the burdens of the inflationary costs of housing and the impacts that has on households. I'm very pleased to tell you that I was one of many people who participated in the very first march along Atlantic Avenue, which called for a disparity study to measure the disparities that exist in city contracting with minority businesses. That contract did go forward, and it was supported by the Human Rights Commission. My colleagues who were there, many of them are in the room, can attest that we really moved that. We participated in that conversation in a very positive way to call for that disparity study, which revealed something that many people have been saying for a long time, which is that there are disparities in city contracting. And so I'm very proud to have an opportunity to support the work of the Minority Business Council, as well as the Human Rights Commission, to support small women and minority-owned, veteran-owned businesses to ensure that people have a chance to fulfill their potential by becoming entrepreneurial, by finding success in business. And so those are just a few of the policy pursuits that we are engaging in at City Council, as well as, of course, the fundamental issue of participating in democracy, of voting, of participating in your government at the local, the state, and the federal level. And I think the more that we encourage people and ensure that people participate fully in their government, we'll see a responsiveness in policies that helps to not only promote healing, but to allow people to have a much better chance of achieving success in their lives and within their families and in our communities. Thanks.
All of us are comfortable within our own comfort zone of the familiar. But in order to overcome our own biases and the biases of others, we have to reach out to visit somebody else's house of worship, something different from your own, for example. Try to make friends at large and not just within your own circle. And the other side of it, but this country is the most diverse nation on earth, you know. So we have opportunities to reach out and visit with others, and that can make a huge difference. I grew up only in a Jewish country, and look how, you know, I'm at home in the Christian world, in the Muslim world, in the Buddhist world, and I take delight in building bridges of healing. Part of it is my own history, but nonetheless, in this country, we have this opportunity, but we have to take the initiative sometimes. And sometimes it comes with some pain to make the adjustment, but it's worth it.
Thank you very much, and we are coming to the end of our, is there anybody else that had their hand up? Oh, please, yes.
I just wanted to provide a little bit more clarity on my question, because I do think y'all answered it at the level of how to help us, like, you know, people in the audience. But part of that question was what you all have brought up as the systemic portion of it as well. So in your organizations, how are you promoting that amongst you all? Because it's easy to create programs and policies for us, you know, because we all need it. But sometimes the people who are sitting at the table are broken themselves. So in those situations, while you have this platform and this opportunity to create change, sometimes it still is skewed. Sometimes there still is those biases, and that's what also creates part of the problem too. So within your organizations and the people you're sitting next to, how is that being enforced, encouraged in regards to that? So I just wanted to add that later.
Thank you so much. That is very, very a good point. And while we have our closing remarks, maybe they can, our panelists can add to that. But just to give you an example, every member of the Virginia Human Rights Commission is pretty involved in different communities. I myself am the chair of the Virginia Commission of Latino Organizations. And what we do for the past 20 years, we make sure that we train our youth to understand how they come and speak to their representatives. And we take them every year to the General Assembly to make sure that they learn how to review the proposals that may come along. And if we don't get engaged, as our council member mentioned here, I think civic engagement is the answer. It is not just organizations, it's individuals. Every single one of us has a stake in making sure that our country, our state, our city, and our little tiny communities can take a step forward and continue to doing that, not get tired. But anyway, now we're gonna go into.
Do we have time for one more quick question?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Just my question is about, I hear what the role of churches can do to help people to know each other, understand each other better across races, and that reduces the fear. What else is happening or can be done to reduce that fear of, you know, what might happen, the suspicion of others or the intentions that really are behind a lot of the divisions in hatred? Are there systematic efforts, maybe in the context of the diversity, inclusion, different organization, to really multiply this kind of opportunities to get together, to understand each other, to listen to each other and to understand how much we have in common rather than just only what divides us? I mean, there are a lot of voices that kind of stoke the fear, but there could be a lot of organizations and opportunities to really get a message that reduces the fear and promotes the understanding. Are there some of the examples of what is happening that you could give us to help with that?
Thank you. Father, or, Yes,
Beatrice.
Councilmember Lucci.
Hi, I just want to take a moment to sort of flip the question on you, to provide you an opportunity to talk about the World Culture Festival, which I know you're a great advocate for.
Yeah.
And because I believe that the mission of the World Cultural Festival and the whole coalition of folks who are working together is, your intent is to do just what you described. So if you don't mind, I'd like to invite you to just share a little bit about the World Culture Festival, maybe invite those who are watching to participate, and just talk a little bit about what your inspiration was to form that program and what you hope to accomplish with it. Because I think, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot like that, I think that you're working to do just what you asked us to describe. And I think it's a really remarkable example of people coming together to pursue that goal. And I just would like for you to talk about it if you're comfortable.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Chantal.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Lucci. We are organizing on March 25th at the Convention Center, a big event, which is called the World Cultural Festival. And the entire idea is in this environment where we have a lot of differences and we are fearful of each other, is to have an opportunity to come together and with a very diverse crowd. There will be cultural performances from all over the world, but all represented here in Hampton Roads. And also inspiring speakers for organizations and initiatives that really promote harmony and peace, and do wonderful things to help having people who are not really included easily to be be part of it. And for a lot of people to have the opportunity to see, hey, we see a lot of things that unite us, just having fun together, sharing food, having joyful experiences, and to start for a moment to have that feeling of, hey, we are one world family. We're just one human being, as the gentleman was saying before. So that's just, we believe that those opportunities, and there are others, but we want to offer that experience and maybe see how we can multiply. And we have great support from the city of Virginia Beach, as well as cities also across Hampton Roads and many organizations represented here. So we are really inviting you all to come join us and be part of that historical moment, and maybe make more regular events, something that would really bring peace and harmony to our
Very good. And that will give us an opportunity right now to thank all of the organizations that came here to support this effort. First of all, the City of Virginia Beach Housing in Neighborhood Preservation, Hampton Roads Black Caucus, Hampton Roads Stand Up for Kids, LGBT Coastal Virginia Life Center, NAMI Coastal Virginia, Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities, the World Cultural Festival, YWCA Southampton Roads, and I just want to accentuate that the World Culture Festival will be on March 25th from 11 a.m. until 7 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m. But yes, the community is invited, and I want to give you good news. Children 15 years and younger are free of charge. So this is so that the families can join us at that event. And,
I want to extend an invitation because we're inviting people to come to a great event. If you've never been to a Jewish worship service, tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. at the most gracious Church of the Holy Apostles of the Parkway, we have in-person Shabbat worship for about an hour. We sing. You will see that our prayers from my sense are quite meaningful. And then we Jews don't pray without schmoozing and nashing afterwards. We need to eat a little bit and hug each other. And usually my services, and Father Mario will attest to it, I have more non-Jews than Jews. You know? So come and let's hug each other, okay?
thank you. I'll take that as your final words.
If I can-
We're gonna go and give the opportunity to our other speakers to say a few words to end our night. Let's start. Let's start.
I have one,
Okay.
one
Oh, you know what? Let me tell you one thing. I'm very happy actually that the community is very engaged, so I'm happy. Go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
one of the things that, as I look upon this in the community, is that we can have all the forums and everything and come to meetings and everything until we become solutionists. Come to the table with solutions to the problems of today. That's the way we're gonna solve it. And as one gentleman who was a pastor was standing here, the church is the bedrock of our community. So go the church, so go our community. If our churches are fragmented, then our community would be in chaos. Then when we meet, either we're gonna be in community, in unity and community, or we're gonna be in chaos. So we have to determine, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here, in chaos or unity in our community, working together to solve the problems of today in solutions? And the church is the body of Christ. So go the head, so go the rest of the body. If the clergy and the pastors won't get together and bring their congregations together and maybe have a fellowship in the park and then break down those walls of hostility that's already being torn down. But we are to amplify that in our community through our love for one another. But until we do that, come to the table with solutions. You know, we can talk all day,
Right.
but until we have solutions,
Yeah.
we must be solutionists, solving the problems of today.
Excellent point. And I just want to add that the Virginia Beach Human Rights Commission is very open to have as many conversations as this as possible. We are here to serve to you as the venue for conversations, for discussions, and to also connect you with people in our city and our state, and even in our country that can help you solve issues, come together, help you with organizing. You know, just give us a call, give us a ring. Our information probably will be on at the end of the day. You're gonna have that contact information that you need to get connected and get involved. And now, truly, thank you to the audience, first of all, for being such an outstanding group of people that are truly interested in bettering our community. So I'm gonna give the word to say good night to our panelists, and go ahead, Mr. Bellucci.
Well, thank you, and I really want to thank the audience for sticking out. It's been almost 2 hours of conversation, and I know that's a long time to be seated in a chair, but I think this was a really important conversation. It was a very illuminating conversation. I learned a lot from the conversation that I'm going to take into my work at City Council, as well that I'm going to take into my practice as a citizen. I want to thank Beatrice Amberman. Let's give her a round of applause for very capably leading this conversation, and to each and every member of the Human Rights Commission for inviting us here, all of us here, to have this really, really important conversation. I've served on the City Council for approaching 4 years, and I've lived in Virginia Beach for almost all my life. And the takeaway from this conversation could be that we're extremely divided, that that hope is lost, that we have insurmountable challenges based on race, based on prejudice, based on the things that make us different. But in this almost 4 years of serving on City Council, I've experienced incredible highs, monumental challenges, both that are unique to our city and that we've experienced nationally. And one thing that I know for sure, as a lifelong resident of Virginia Beach, and through the 4 years that I've served on council and the 5 years before that I've served on the Human Rights Commission, is that we have an incredible community in Virginia Beach. We have a loving community, a strong community, a respectful community, a connected community. We are not immune from the challenges that we discussed here tonight and that have been experienced locally, but we're in a uniquely positive position to work through these as one united community. And I've had the experience of seeing this firsthand on council and through our work on the Human Rights Commission. So I don't want to gloss over the challenges, but I want to end on a positive note by telling you that you have a city council, you have policymakers, you have city staff, and I know you have a diverse, connected community of people who share your goals of harmony, of peace, of understanding and respect. And I look forward to leaving this auditorium and working with each and every one of you in the Human Rights Commission and each of us as citizens to make sure that our community is stronger, better, and more equal than how we found it. So thank you very much.
Rabbi,
A few words. Let's remember that diversity is not about being divisive. Diversity is a great divine gift that America has been blessed with. But within that diversity, there's also unity of those ideals and values that make us one. But be very, very respectful that America was created a home for a diverse body of humanity assembled from the four corners of the earth. Thank you so much.
excellent word, Rabbi. Father Melendez.
Once again, thank you, gracias to all of you for being here. Your presence is a gift. And for that, we thank you for being here. And thank you for the panelists and for you for moderating this. The only thing I would say is that, especially going into the fact that we also need solutions to what we need to do. If you are a person of prayer, if you are a person of faith, then take some time tonight to pray for the inspiration and for the wisdom and yes, even a sense of humor, because we need it at some point to see what we can do. If you're not a person of faith, take a moment of silence, center yourself, and see what I can do with others to do the best we can. And as a Christian, I say, if it's the will of God, and when we wake up tomorrow, and there's a day tomorrow, may we continue this struggle because we will not be alive for the day in which there is no more racism in this country anymore. No, this is going to be a daily struggle, daily. And we need to keep at it. But the struggle is worthy, the struggle is needed.
Thank you. Jonathan Zhu.
I was on a panel convened by the Virginia Beach City Public Schools in June of 2020, very soon after the killing of George Floyd. It was on Zoom, and there were several hundred people there. And my closing comment then is similar to what I'll share now, which is that if we are not persistent in addressing the racism that exists in our society, we will be back here having these same conversations time after time and time again. And I said that then, and I think we are still in that place. Now, I'm not surprised that we are still in that place. The reality is that on land not very far from here, 400 years ago, racism had a significant head start. And so 2, 3, 4 years of work on these issues, even persistently, is not going to address everything that has been embedded on our shores and in our land. And so we need to continue this work. And someone asked about groups to do that. Certainly, please check out the table in the hallway for the Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities. My colleague Paula Bazemore is our Hampton Roads program manager here in the area. The Hampton Roads Community Foundation regularly convenes events to address these issues. Virginians for Reconciliation, the Nussbaum Center, Virginia Wesleyan, Barbara Ham Lee has a discussion series. I could go on and on. There are lots of us doing this work. We probably need to do a better job of doing it together rather than disparate efforts. And certainly we'll do our part at VCIC on that. The last thing I'll share is a framework that has been really helpful to me. It comes from the work of Brian Stevenson, who I think is a prophetic voice in our time. He founded the Equal Justice Initiative. And he talks about a pathway from proximity to relationship to empathy to justice. We need to be proximate to those who are different from us, and for some of us that requires more effort than others. That gives us the opportunity to build relationships, which gives us the opportunity to have a window into someone else's lived experience and build empathy, which gives us the opportunity to then co-create a more just society. So I look forward to being on that journey with each of you.
Dr. Gateman.
So I'd just like to close, and I wanted to, just expound upon your question as you had talked about the notion of, healing within a group. So one of the things that I had an opportunity to do at OGU is to lead the Monarch Task Force for Inclusive Excellence. And one of the non-negotiables for everybody on that task force is that they engage in an assessment called the Intercultural Competence Inventory. It's called the IDI. And so that particular inventory gives them developmentally, where they are developmentally, where they are perceived, because we all think we're better than what we are, right? In whatever it is that we say we do. And so it gives them that score, and then it gives them just not that score, but then now what? What do I do with that? Because to your point, as it relates to people who are doing this work who need healing and help, I was one of those people. I was one of those people who I had all of the pedigree, I thought, but I just didn't have the words. I was minimized in spaces that I would often be in, even as someone who is very learned, right? You know, on paper, right? And so that was very helpful for me. And so it was a non-negotiable, and it took some getting to that because people just wanted to be on the task force, and have it on their video, right? So accountability. I would like to close though, one of my favorite books that I have recently read and reading another iteration of it is Heather McGhee's The Sum of Us. And her book really speaks to what we've all talked about here today, that American society has inherited and perpetuated this mentality that the idea of progress for one group of people will hold another group back. And so she speaks to that. She's like, and really, a really clear example of that is a ramp for someone in a wheelchair is just as helpful to someone with a baby stroller. So you provide a ramp for someone in a wheelchair, you know, because they're disabled, is going to be just as advantageous for someone in a stroller, right? And so I'll leave you with some words from Harold and the Blue Notes. The world won't get no better if we just let it be, okay? So it's up to you and me. All right, thank you all.
In regard, friends and neighbors, I'm going to invite you to go to the foyer. We're gonna have a little reception there, but I invite you to really get in touch with the organizations that our city has there to make sure that we all get engaged. So conversation and action. On behalf of the City of Virginia Beach, the Virginia Human Rights Commission, thank you and good night. Stay